On this planet, there are roads that seem like they should never have been built at all. They cling to raw mountain walls. They twist across near vertical slopes. They hang above drops so deep that looking down feels like a mistake in itself. From a distance, they can seem unreal, less like roads and more like thin scars cut into the edge of the world. But they are real. And every day, somewhere on Earth, people still drive them. These are not just difficult roads. They are places where nature never truly gave permission, where the ground shifts, the weather turns without warning, and a single narrow lane can become the only line between isolation and the outside world. Here, danger does not come from one thing alone, but from everything at once. Altitude, blind turns, falling rock, collapsing earth, violent wind, heavy fog, and surfaces that can betray a tire in an instant. On roads like these, survival can depend on inches. A small misjudgment, a moment of distraction, one tire too close to the edge, and the journey becomes something else entirely. Yet what is perhaps most astonishing is not that these roads exist. It is that people continue to use them. Not for thrill, not for spectacle, but because for many communities, these impossible routes are still part of ordinary life. They carry workers, families, supplies, food, fuel, and hope through landscapes that seem designed to keep human beings out. So tonight, we travel across some of the most dangerous roads on Earth. Roads shaped by cliffs, storms, ice, deserts, and time. Roads where every mile carries tension, and where every turn reminds us that in some parts of the world, the simple act of getting from one place to another can still feel like a test of courage. North Yungas Road, Bolivia. Some roads feel dangerous because they are remote. North Yungas feels dangerous because everything about it seems designed to go wrong. For years, much of the world knew it by one unforgettable name, Death Road. And once you see it, that name feels earned. The road cuts across Bolivia's mountains like a narrow scar on the side of a cliff. In many places, there is barely enough room for a vehicle. On one side, a wall of rock. On the other, a drop so deep it seems to pull the eye straight down. For decades, before a safer bypass opened, this road was linked to hundreds of deaths and became one of the most feared routes on Earth. What made it so deadly was not just the height, but the constant uncertainty. Waterfalls spill across the road. Mud keeps the surface slick. Fog can erase visibility. Loose rock can fall without warning. And when the edge is only inches away, one small mistake is enough. Even the driving rules revealed how serious it was. On North Yungas, vehicles kept to the left so drivers could better judge the distance between their wheels and the cliff. That is the kind of road this was, one where survival depended on seeing the drop as clearly as possible. And still, people used it. Not for adventure, but because for many years, this was simply the way through. Workers, families, food, fuel, and supplies all had to pass along a road that seemed to challenge gravity at every turn. That is what makes North Yungas so haunting. It is not dangerous in theory, it is dangerous in a deeply human way. Memorials still stand along the roadside, quiet reminders that this was never just a road. It was a daily gamble. Fairy Meadows Road, Pakistan. If North Yungas feels like terror in full view, Fairy Meadows Road feels more deceptive, because at first, it is almost beautiful. This is the road that leads toward the base of Nanga Parbat, one of the highest and most feared mountains on Earth. But the road itself is part of the ordeal. It was carved by hand centuries ago along a cliff face, with almost no structural protection by modern standards. The track is narrow, uneven, and in many places completely without guardrails. Ordinary cars do not belong here. Only specially modified four-wheel drive Jeeps, handled by local drivers who know the mountain, can take it on. And even then, the margin for error is almost nothing. The route is only about 16 kilometers long, but vehicles take more than an hour to finish it because speed has to stay painfully low beside exposed drops. Maintenance is minimal. After landslides or snow collapses, residents often clear rocks by hand just to keep the track barely passable. That is what makes Fairy Meadows Road so unsettling. It is not chaos, it is control under pressure. Every turn feels exact, every movement feels deliberate, and the whole road carries that same quiet message. One mistake, and it is over. At the village of Tato, the drivable section ends. From there, travelers still have to continue the final stretch on foot or by horse, which somehow feels fitting because roads like this do not really let you arrive easily. They make you earn the landscape first. D915, Turkey. If some roads frighten you with chaos, the D915 does it with geometry. Because this road does not just climb a mountain, it folds back on itself again and again in a series of tight, hairpin turns cut into a steep mountainside with almost no margin for error. The route is known for its extreme gradient, its high concentration of switchbacks, and long sections without guardrails. In its most famous stretch, 13 sharp bends are compressed into roughly 5 kilometers, forcing drivers to stay pinned to the edge of deep drop-offs while negotiating turns that feel almost angular rather than smooth. That is what makes the D915 so visually overwhelming. There is barely any release. One bend ends and the next begins almost immediately. The road is narrow, the cliff is close, and the exposure is constant. In many places, only one vehicle can pass at a time. A small mistake in wheel position can mean loss of traction, and much worse. And yet this is not some abandoned thrill route. For local people, it still functions as a daily road, carrying everything from motorcycles to heavy trucks through a landscape that offers almost no forgiveness. That contrast is what gives the D915 its power. It looks like a place built for fear, but for others, it remains part of ordinary life. Abano Pass, Georgia. If the D915 feels engineered to test your nerves, Abano Pass feels much older than that, like a road at the edge of the inhabited world. High in the Caucasus, it serves as the only land connection to Tusheti, one of the most isolated regions in Georgia. And for much of the year, that connection disappears. The pass is open only for a short season, usually around June to October, before heavy snow, landslides, and extreme mountain weather shut it down again completely. That alone gives the road a different kind of weight. This is not just a dangerous crossing, it is a seasonal lifeline, a road people have to use while they still can. And along the way, the mountain leaves quiet reminders of what that means. Small roadside memorials stand near the bends, marking places where someone did not make it through. They do not need explanation. On a road like this, their presence says enough. That is what makes Abano Pass so powerful. It feels less like infrastructure and more like a frontier, remote, exposed, and only briefly open to human movement before winter takes it back. Passage du Gois, France. After the cliffs, the abysses, and the mountain switchbacks, Passage du Gois changes the rhythm completely. Because this road is dangerous in a different way. It does not cling to a mountainside. It does not hang over a ravine. Instead, it crosses open sea, and twice each day, the sea takes it back. The causeway stretches for about 4 kilometers between the mainland and Noirmoutier, and during high tide it disappears entirely beneath the water, sometimes under more than a meter, and at times much more, depending on the tide cycle. That is what makes it so unsettling. A road is supposed to be fixed, reliable, visible, but Passage du Gois exists on borrowed time. For a few hours it is passable. Then the Atlantic returns, covering the surface and erasing the route as if it had never been there at all. And even when the water pulls back, the danger does not fully leave with it. Each submersion coats the roadway with seaweed, algae, and marine silt, turning the surface slick and unpredictable. In the past, before the route was stabilized, its sandy course shifted with the currents and depended heavily on local knowledge. Even now, misjudging the tide or overestimating the time available can leave vehicles trapped by fast-rising water. The road has long been associated with one of the highest rates in France of vehicles being claimed by the sea through driver error. And yet, life still gathers around it. When the tide retreats, people come out onto the exposed flats to collect shellfish. The place briefly becomes calm, communal, almost ordinary, which may be the strangest thing of all. A few hours earlier, it was under the ocean. A few hours later, it will be again. That is the power of Passage du Gois. It reminds you that not every dangerous road needs a cliff to terrify you. Sometimes all it takes is a flat line across the sea and the knowledge that the ocean is already on its way back. Los Caracoles Pass, Chile to Argentina. If Passage du Gois disappears underwater, Los Caracoles overwhelms you with scale. This is one of those roads that looks almost impossible even from a distance. A steep wall of mountain cut by switchbacks stacked one above another, as if the road had been folded into the Andes. On the Chilean side, the pass is defined by 29 tight hairpin turns, packed so closely together that there is barely any straight stretch between them. Vehicles come out of one bend and are forced almost immediately into the next, high above the valley floor. What makes it so striking is not just the design, but the contrast between the road and the traffic it still carries. This is not a scenic lane used only by tourists. Heavy cargo trucks and even double-decker buses continue to use the route, climbing and descending a narrow mountain road where many exposed sections have no guardrails at all. The scale of the vehicles makes the road feel even smaller, and the mountain even less forgiving. And then there is the weather. Los Caracoles is frequently affected by snowstorms and avalanches, severe enough at times to bury vehicles and shut the corridor down in a matter of hours. The landscape around it is harsh and almost bare, gray rock, high altitude, very little vegetation, which only adds to the feeling that this is a place shaped more by geology than by human intention. That is what gives Los Caracoles its power on screen. It feels huge, exposed, relentless. The road does not just cross the Andes, it seems to wrestle with them, one switchback at a time. Karakoram Highway, Pakistan to China. If Los Caracoles is dramatic in scale, the Karakoram Highway carries something heavier. Because this road is not only dangerous, it feels historic, geologic, almost carved through a place where the earth itself is still unfinished. Often called one of the highest paved international roads in the world, the highway runs through the collision zone of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates, a landscape so unstable that landslides and rockfall remain constant threats, and even light rain can send enormous amounts of debris down onto the road. And the road's history is written in loss. During the roughly 20 years of construction, more than 1,000 engineers and workers were reported to have died from rockfalls, tunnel collapses, and falls into deep gorges. That is one reason the route has sometimes been called the world's highest graveyard. But what gives the Karakoram Highway real weight is the way danger, history, and landscape all keep overlapping. In 2010, a massive landslide created Jalalabad Lake, drowning part of the original road and forcing the construction of 5 new mountain tunnels to reconnect the route. And along the corridor, there are said to be more than 50,000 ancient petroglyphs, some dating back around 5,000 years, reminders that long before modern trucks and border traffic, people were already moving through this same mountain world. That is what makes this highway different. It is not just a dangerous road through big scenery. It feels like a corridor through deep time, where mountains are still rising, rock is still falling, and every mile seems to carry both human ambition and human cost. Zoji, India. After the vast sweep of the Karakoram, Zoji brings the danger back to something more immediate. This is not just a mountain road, it is a lifeline. Zoji is the only major road link between the Kashmir Valley and Ladakh, which means the route carries far more than travelers. It carries supplies, fuel, goods, and daily movement through one of the harshest corridors in the Himalayas. That practical importance is exactly what makes it so tense. People do not use this road because it is spectacular. They use it because they have to. And the road gives very little in return. In many sections, it is barely wide enough for a single vehicle. There are no real barriers, only cliff edges, mud, and unstable ground. Fog can settle over the pass with almost no warning, and strong mountain winds can push through the corridor while drivers try to hold their line along the edge. The surface itself is often just dirt and slush, which means traction can vanish quickly under the weight of trucks and buses. Then comes the snow. Zoji records some of the most extreme snowfall found on any drivable mountain pass, with snow accumulation reaching astonishing depths and avalanche danger remaining a constant threat. For roughly half the year, traffic can be disrupted or cut off altogether. In a place like this, winter is not just a season, it is an occupying force. That is why India has been building the Zoji tunnel beneath the mountain, an attempt to reduce dependence on a route that has always been vulnerable to weather, blockage, and sudden closure. But until that fully changes life here, the pass still represents the old reality. A narrow, exposed road where one bad stretch of mud, one blind movement in the fog, or one avalanche above can turn an ordinary crossing into something far more serious. That is what makes Zoji so gripping. It does not feel dramatic in a theatrical way, it feels necessary. And on dangerous roads, necessity can be the most unsettling thing of all. Taroko Gorge Road, Taiwan. After roads shaped by snow and altitude, Taroko feels almost unreal. The gorge is famous for its marble walls, its narrow ledges, and the gray-green river cutting through the stone below. It is one of those places that can look serene from a distance, almost delicate. But that beauty is exactly what makes it so deceptive, because this is not a calm landscape, it is an active one. The road runs through a mountain corridor shaped by uplift, water, and constant instability. Earthquakes are part of life here. Typhoons can trigger sudden closures, and rockfall remains one of the greatest dangers, with sections of the route cut directly into steep slopes and tunnel-like overhangs where the mountain hangs close above passing vehicles. In places like this, the road never feels fully separate from the cliff. It feels borrowed from it. That is what makes Taroko so cinematic. It is not just beautiful scenery with a road passing through it. It is beauty under pressure. Marble walls rising straight up, narrow bends, moist air, fast water below, and always that quiet sense that the mountain is still moving, still shedding stone, still reminding people that this passage exists on nature's terms, not ours. And that may be why Taroko stays with people, because few roads capture this contrast so well. Elegance and violence side by side. A place that looks almost poetic until you remember that one storm, one tremor, or one falling rock can change everything. Kabul to Jalalabad Highway, Afghanistan. If Taroko is beautiful and unstable, the Kabul-Jalalabad Highway feels heavier than that, because here danger does not come from the landscape alone. The road winds through a steep mountain corridor east of Kabul, following narrow ledges above the Kabul River and forcing traffic through tight curves, blind sections, and exposed drops. Even without everything else, it would already be a punishing road. Heavy trucks crowd the route. Overtaking can be reckless. Space is limited. And in places where the edge falls away so quickly, one bad decision can carry real consequences. But what gives this highway its weight is the fact that the road has long existed under pressure from more than geography. For years, it has carried the visible marks of conflict, instability, and strain. That changes the feeling of the road completely. It is no longer just a dangerous drive through the mountains. It becomes a corridor where natural risk and human history seem to press in at the same time. And that is what makes it so unsettling. On some roads, the fear comes from weather, on others from altitude or isolation. Here, the danger feels layered. The cliffs are real, the traffic is real, the narrow margins are real. But so is the sense that this road has been asked to carry far more than a road should. That is why the Kabul-Jalalabad highway lingers in the mind. Not because it is the most visually spectacular route in this film, but because it feels so unforgiving, so burdened, and so real. Halsema Highway, Philippines. If the Kabul-Jalalabad highway feels burdened by history, Halsema feels alive in a different way. This is the kind of road where the mountain never seems fully at rest. Running through the highlands of northern Luzon, Halsema Highway has long been associated with deadly crashes and is often described as one of the most dangerous roads in the Philippines. But what makes it so unnerving is not just the steep terrain. It is the feeling that the road is always exposed to forces still actively shaping it. During the monsoon season, landslides and rockfalls become a constant threat. And in the worst moments, entire sections of mountainside can give way and erase parts of the road within seconds. And then there is the fog. Not ordinary fog, but the kind that can collapse visibility almost to zero, even in full daylight. On a mountain highway with sharp curves, deep ravines, and long, unguarded edges, that changes everything. The road can go from difficult to blinding in moments. Visually, the road has a harsh, unfinished quality. Some sections are carved directly into solid slopes, with massive rock overhangs hanging low above passing vehicles. Others run beside drops thousands of feet deep, with little or no protection at the edge. It feels less like a road imposed on the mountain than a narrow compromise with it. That is what gives Halsema its power. The danger here does not feel fixed. It feels active. Not a dead mountain, but a living one. And on roads like that, the threat is never just the curve ahead. It is the landscape itself. Tianmen Mountain Road, China. After roads shaped by landslides, war, and weather, Tianmen Mountain Road brings the danger back into something almost architectural. At first glance, it barely looks real. The road climbs the mountain in an astonishing chain of 99 hairpin bends, compressed into roughly 11 kilometers, giving it one of the highest densities of switchbacks in the world. In some sections, the distance between one bend and the next is less than 20 meters, which means drivers have to reverse steering almost instantly while vertical rock walls block visibility ahead. That is what makes Tianmen so striking on screen. It does not just rise, it coils. From below, the road looks like a giant ribbon pinned to the mountainside, folding back and forth with almost unnatural precision. And yet the danger is not only visual. A small steering mistake on a road like this can send a vehicle toward a fall of several hundred meters, with almost no room to recover. That is also why access is tightly controlled. Private driving is generally restricted on the mountain road, and most visitors are taken up by park buses driven by professional drivers trained specifically for the route. That detail tells you everything. This is not a road designed for casual confidence. It is a road that demands skill, discipline, and total concentration. And at the top, the route ends beneath Tianmen Cave, a vast natural arch carved through the mountain itself. A finale so dramatic it almost feels staged, except that it is real. That is what gives Tianmen Mountain Road its power. It turns danger into spectacle. Not a wild road in the usual sense, but a mountain ascent so controlled, so compressed, and so visually extreme that it feels like engineering pushed right to the edge of illusion. Skipper's Canyon Road, New Zealand. If Tianmen feels controlled and almost theatrical, Skipper's Canyon feels older, rougher, and far less forgiving. The road cuts through a remote gold mining landscape above a deep canyon, following ledges so narrow that in many sections, two vehicles cannot pass safely at all. There are blind corners, crumbling edges, and long stretches where the drop is always present just beyond the wheels. But what makes this road instantly memorable is one detail that says more than any warning sign could. On Skipper's Canyon Road, rental car insurance is often void the moment you drive onto it. That alone tells you what kind of place this is, because this is not a road that forgives mistakes lightly. It demands patience, nerve, and full attention from the first turn to the last. Drivers have to ease along cliffside sections where the surface is narrow, rough, and deeply exposed, with almost no sense of comfort anywhere in the frame. And yet the setting is undeniably beautiful. The canyon walls glow with dry, golden tones. The old suspension bridge adds a feeling of history and isolation. The whole place looks cinematic, but in the kind of way that makes you uneasy rather than relaxed. Beauty is here, but so is the constant awareness that one bad move would be enough. That is what gives Skipper's Canyon its power. It is not just dangerous, it feels like a road from another era, one that survived into the present without ever becoming safe.